Hello there.
Hello. Welcome to Almost 30. How's everybody feeling? It's Linz and Krista. I hope we find you in a cozy place listening to our show,
Mhm.
maybe on a walk. We're thankful that you're here.
We're so glad you're here. You don't need to be 30 or almost 30 to listen. Just a little disclaimer. You can be who you are and where you're at. We started the pod during that time. So, just a little info for you. We talk about health, wellness, spirituality, and yeah, we're so grateful you're here. We've been doing this for a while. You could say we're OGs.
We're OGs, baby.
You could say we're OGs.
Inducted into the Hall of Fame of podcasting. Yeah, I mean, I feel like we are.
True.
Period.
It was funny. We had someone as a guest and they were like, I'm so inspired. Like, I just love your process. Like guys sent the agreement and you, and I was like, they're inspired by like our back end systems. I was like, sure.
I mean, it's an important part of, I think, how everything flows and what you see on the outside has to be
That's
backed up by a
true.
nice system on the inside, just like our bodies, which takes us into no, just
Yes. Yeah. No, I saw so in this conversation we talk about the relationship between mental health and diet and nutrition, which I think is super cutting edge. I saw Dr. Uma at an event and I was blown away by just the
Mhm.
concept and the conversation around this
Yeah.
because I know for me that my mental health is directly impacted by what I eat. And there's the conversation around your mental health and your relationship to your body and what your expectations of your body are and your body journey. And that whole thing, that's a whole mental health conversation. But then there's like the science of mental health related to anxiety, depression, things like Parkinson's or, you know, different types of diseases related to the mind or afflictions related to the mind that are
Mhm.
directly impacted by what we eat. And I'm so about giving people easy ways to support themselves and their mental health, especially when it's something like nutrition.
Yeah, so often, I think, medication for mental health is incredibly important, and so often it's prescribed without taking a honest and thorough look at nutrition, lifestyle, what have you. So I think this is a really important piece of the puzzle that so many of us are just missing because life is so fast. There's so much going on. And I think food becomes, just the thought of food becomes kind of secondary and just like, let's just consume. I'm either hungry or I'm emotional or whatever. And it's just kind of this thing that we do so mindlessly often. And once I became aware of how food made me feel and made that connection, which sounds like, hey, duh, it was like, wait a second. So I've been feeling like really foggy in the morning and kind of uninspired and like just not myself because of this, what I'm eating late at night or whatever it is, or I'm not getting enough water, or there's just a whole host of symptoms that you could be experiencing and that also could be exacerbating your mental health.
Yeah, as an example, for anyone that has anxiety, you could have an iron deficiency. So, for people that, might feel anxious or might experience anxiety, you can think about different minerals to increase in your diet or different things to support you in feeling better. And we all know that mental health is so important to how you show up in the world, to being on purpose, to having relationships with people you love, to having amazing relationships, to having an amazing relationship with yourself
Mhm.
and a successful career. So all of these like foundational items are key in that.
Yes.
And I know with me with caffeine or with too much
Mhm.
sugar, that can really affect my mood. If I have sugar in the evening, I can't sleep. I can't do dessert in the evening. Um, and there's just certain foods that I can tell in my body don't really sit well. And I can tell other foods in my body's like, yes, this feels really amazing. So,
Yes.
how can we move closer to that, to supporting us to being our best selves through these things?
Yeah, and really, I find I'm super sensitive to when food has been prepared with care and love, whether it's home cooked or, for example, when we were in Jamaica, we went to this place and this guy, Murphy, like prepared this food for us. And he came out and he talked with us and he was so passionate and
Oh,
excited. And I literally tasted it in the food. It was
mhm.
just crazy. But it's like that where we're not taking into account the vibrational quality of our food, whether it's like, you know, you don't have access to really fresh fruits and vegetables. Maybe it's on a truck for days and days and days. And y'all,
Yes.
some is better than none. So like just take that. But
Mhm.
we also don't know like how it's being handled, like just how it's being grown, whether it's like, you know, chickens and freaking cages
I
laying eggs
know.
or free range or pasture raised,
Mhm.
like things like that, which, I'm fully aware come with a price.
Yes, and why is the most accessible food for
I
people the
know.
worst?
It's
So
crazy.
it's like if we think about it,
It's
we would
crazy.
assume that a farm would have the easiest to access food for the lowest income people
Yes.
because it's a farm, it's close to home, it's in the community, it can be grown from the earth. The
Mhm.
resources required are labor, sun, water, these other things. But it's like now we have sort of looked at how when we think about food, it's like, well, people need access, but they're getting access to the absolute bottom of the barrel from a
Yeah.
nutritional perspective type of food. And then it's impacting them and not supporting them in becoming anything or
Yeah.
coming out of the socioeconomic structure that they were born into.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot about kids in schools with
Yeah.
having access to that type of fresh, nutritious food and, what that looks like in more, prestigious schools as opposed to inner city schools or what have
Yeah, in
you. It's
LA.
like,
Hmm.
you know, how are we expecting our children to learn and grow and feel clear, and like open to, I don't know. I'm thinking back and I was in a very privileged position at a private school, but still our lunches, like having cookies at 10-minute break, putting me into a coma. Like,
Same.
it's like, what are we doing?
It's weird with children. I feel like in that generation, I don't know if it's true now, but it was like just feed them anything.
Yeah,
It was kind of like whatever's around.
totally.
Like, I even thought sometimes with parents even of with kids, it's like they'll eat salmon and broccoli, but then feed the kids whatever,
Uh-huh.
and it's kind of an interesting concept that with children, we're kinda like, "Eh," but I don't know, I don't have picky
Yeah.
kids, I can only imagine what it's like to have a picky child and not have them really wanting to eat. Oh, I had a friend I was having dinner with, she has 2 kids, and she's like, "Oh, my kids ate so well," and then they spent the summer with my parents,
Mm.
their grandparents, and she's like, "Now they literally won't eat anything." 'Cause
Wow.
they had access to, like, everything the grandparents were eating, like chicken
Wow.
nuggets and, like, just unhealthy related stuff for kids, and
Yeah.
she's like, "It's so hard to get them eating back to that." Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
But we talked a little bit about the schools and how we can improve and support a better, food standard for children and a
Mhm.
better food standard for schools, but I think this conversation is incredibly enlightening. There's so many nuggets of insight and inspiration. And I think the topic of mental health hits us all, whether it hits us directly or it impacts someone that we love and someone else in our life. We can all improve on our mental health and supporting ourselves and being mentally well and even happy.
Yeah.
There's even parts of our food that can make us really happy.
Mhm. So Dr. Uma's book is called This Is Your Brain on Food. So it's a guide to the surprising foods that fight things like depression, PTSD, ADHD, anxiety, OCD, and more. So you can get that anywhere books are sold.
Yep. She's a Michelin starred chef. She is a Harvard trained psychiatrist, and she founded and directs the first hospital based nutritional psychiatry service in the United States. So she's the director of nutritional and lifestyle psychiatry at Massachusetts General Hospital.
We
So,
also talked about that hospital food.
yeah, we talked about hospital food.
I
That's terrifying.
love that she, again, talking about people kind of infiltrating spaces and being like, okay, I
Mhm.
really, I'm like, what are we going to do about the hospital food?
Yeah. It's like McDonald's in there.
It's crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So backwards, upside down world. You
Mhm.
can follow her on Instagram at Dr. Uma Naidoo. So it's DrUmaNaidoo.
Thank you, Dr. Uma. We appreciate you. And if you love this episode, be sure to share with a friend. That is how we have grown at almost 30, and we appreciate your listenership so much. If you want to learn more about what we're doing, we have courses and programs and a membership and so much more. Almost30.com.
Morning Microdose, our newest podcast, our newest baby is blowing up. It's number 5 on the charts. And it is your daily dose of inspiration, of insight, our daily dose of just magic. So we
Mhm.
have some of the best quotes and clips from Almost 30 ready for you every single day, ad free at Morning Microdose. So make sure to subscribe and review.
Yeah. Thank you for listening. We will see you on the other side.
We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
So, one of my favorite gifts that we got post wedding was from a friend of mine, and she got me a print of one of our wedding photos on canvas from canvasprints.com. And I was like, how the heck did I not know about this place? So I went perusing. I was like, oh my gosh. Okay. Perfect gift for anyone, any personal, meaningful gift that you want to give someone. Oh my gosh. They turn the photo memories on your phone or really anywhere into the perfect heartfelt gift for anyone on your list. They offer the highest quality canvas prints at affordable prices, like super affordable. I'm so surprised. And the interface is super easy to use. So you just upload your image, you choose the canvas size, and then you check out. And you can even add like a floating frame if you want, which is beautiful. I received as a gift just a normal canvas and it's gorgeous. Honestly, use your imagination. You're going to have so much fun. And they have canvas sizes up to 60 by 60, which is pretty darn big. They also offer metal prints, glass prints, poster prints, foam tiles, photo tiles, wall displays. You're going to have a blast creating. So, if you're looking for a gift for someone, look no further. Canvasprints.com, baby. Super great customer service with 100% money back guarantee. It's going to ship really quick, 3 to 5 business days. So, for our listeners, I'm excited for you. They have a special offer just for you. Go to canvasprints.com and use the code almost30 to get 25% off your entire order of canvas prints, canvas wall displays, metal prints, photo tiles, photo blankets and pillows, and so much more. You're going to find the perfect holiday gift for anyone on your list and save with this amazing offer. That's canvasprints.com. Use the code almost30 for 25% off your entire order. The end of the year is a great time to do some health tests. I always find this is a great way to get a little ahead of the jumpstart that is the new year and really just take stock of what's happening in my body because the end of the year can be so crazy. So this helps me to slow down, tune in. And recently I took the minerals and metals test from Equilife. We recently had the founder of Equilife on the podcast, Dr. Stephen Cabral. You're going to love the episode if you haven't listened already. But if you didn't know, your minerals levels include your electrolytes, which provide you with the energy you need to get through your busy day. So if you're feeling, overwhelmed, brain fog, tired, poor sleep, headaches, highs and lows in energy, mood disturbances, I highly recommend you test your minerals and metals. You might have heavy metal toxicity in your body. The world in which we live in, it's kind of hard to avoid at times. And what's awesome about minerals and metals test from Equilife is that there's no needles or blood, just a few snips of your hair. I actually took it from right in the back of my head. No one sees it. I don't see it. It's all good. And with just a simple, small sample of your hair, you can discover your underlying imbalances like low electrolytes or high heavy metal toxicity. I was really surprised with my test. I saw high levels of, for example, calcium. What's also amazing is that included in your metals and minerals test is a coaching call. So a health coaching call where you can discuss symptoms, review lab results, and get suggestions, including a supplement plan, dietary guidance, sleep guidelines, stress reduction techniques, detox regimens, lifestyle changes, and more. So I'm really excited for you to honestly put the power back in your hands, test your health. The metals and minerals test is so effective, illuminating, and you'll have real suggestions, actionable plans to make sure your levels are at a healthy point. So for our listeners, as always, we got you. They're taking off $100 for you. StephenCabral.com/almost30, StephenCabral.com/almost30. It's going to cost you $99 instead of $199. So that's $100 off the minerals and metals at home lab and coaching call package for our listeners only. So StephenCabral.com/almost30 to reserve yours today. No codes needed. I mean, we've done almost 600 episodes and we haven't had a conversation like this. So I'm really excited. We've kind of picked pieces of the mental health and of nutrition, but together. And I was having lunch with Krista before this and just talking about how, or kind of curious about, like, is this kind of new in your world? Is this a new study in your world? Because I feel like intuitively as humans, we might have been like feeling this, as we tried to nourish ourselves, or maybe just were eating and had the effects mentally, emotionally, but didn't really connect the dots. So I'm just curious in your world of science, of more Western medicine, whether this is like revolutionary and how it's been received.
It's definitely a more nascent field. Nutritional psychiatry is new, and to be honest, I don't think most psychiatrists are practicing this way. But also the science around the gut microbiome, which is younger and only close to 1 to 2 decades in terms of hardcore scientific data, has really helped to bring forward the information about the food-mood connection and the gut-brain connection, upon which nutritional psychiatry is based. It's interesting because in Ayurvedic terms, they don't talk about nutrition, they talk about nourishment. And I think that really speaks to your question, because intuitively as humans, I think that we've known or we feel better when we eat certain ways, but very few people make that connection to the mind. We often think about how we eat in terms of our waistline or the number on a scale, or type 2 diabetes, family history of hypertension, but we're not connecting it to mental health. And I think that is where it's powerful to understand that there's so much power at the end of our fork and that we can control it. It's such an autonomous process. So I'm hoping more people will want to do this and join my mission.
What was your journey to this? Were you in medical school? Like, were you studying psychiatry? What was that moment and journey where you were like, okay, this is what I want to do?
It came early on. There were two aha moments, so to speak. One was early on in my career as a very junior resident. A patient came in and kind of yelled at me for causing him to gain weight. And I knew from the data I was looking at and the visits on my screen that I could review that I hadn't caused him to gain weight, even though I did prescribe an SSRI, which we know one of the side effects is weight gain. But it had been too short a time, and he'd read the side effects and was blaming me. So I was definitely timid, and I said to him, "Tell me, Bill, what did you put in that 20-ounce Dunkin' Donuts coffee that you're drinking?" Because of course it's a favorite in Boston. And as he told me, I was able to enter on the computer what it was. And I'm not much of a calorie counter, but this was for me an easy way to explain something to him. And I said, from that quarter cup of processed creamer, which is kind of has junk in it, and 8 teaspoons of sugar, which you don't realize because someone else is adding those number of packets for you. You're consuming this number of calories every day. And I bet this is even before you've eaten your breakfast. And he said, yes, this is what I drink every single day. But his eyes lit up because when I showed him the empty calories, he saw something he could change. And that was one of my first, I would say, my first aha moment, because I saw that he could see and he felt and could see an action step. He could see something that he could do and he was in control. So we then worked together to make small tweaks to what he was doing, and had a long-term therapeutic relationship where he didn't need a higher dose of the Prozac. He, over time, was able to include lifestyle measures and exercise more, eat healthier, and eventually lost some weight. So it was a great lesson to me in how powerful it was to interpret information back to a patient. And without that knowledge, because most doctors, 1 in 5 medical schools teach enough nutrition in this country. Some schools do better than others, but it seemed to me, why aren't we talking about this, especially when I'm prescribing medications that are impacting weight and metabolic health? My second aha moment was when I was diagnosed with cancer and I was facing my first chemotherapy treatment. And for the first time in my journey, I was feeling tremulous and anxious, and this was a new feeling for me. And I had already started and founded my clinic at Mass General in nutritional psychiatry, and I thought, part of the fear was I knew the side effects that I was facing. And on the morning of my first treatment, it dawned on me, why am I not doing what I tell my patients to do every single day? Why am I not leaning into what I know?
Mm.
And that's when I, just upped everything I was doing in terms of my diet, my nutrition. And every single week, my doctors would say to me, what are you eating? What did you bring for lunch for your chemotherapy appointment? Because they saw me tolerate the side effects so well, by how I was eating, how I was approaching it, and by paying attention to certain nutrients, the time of day I was eating, making sure that I was nourishing my body. And so unexpectedly was another lesson for me that this is a very powerful tool for people
Mm.
to have.
I'm actually so curious, what that looked like in when you were doing chemotherapy and what you were eating and the
Mhm.
time of day and why that mattered.
I made sure that I was always sort of well nourished throughout the day. And in other words, chemotherapy can make you feel nauseous. It can give you many different feelings. And I made sure that I went in, you start super early in the morning, and I would make sure that I had my favorite, something my grandmother taught me how to make, which was my golden chai. So always something with turmeric, pinch of black pepper to activate it, some form of milk that I had. Usually it was either almond or coconut, a drop of honey, something that was very warming and soothing, but also hydration. I would make sure I had a glass of cool water, not cold, not ice cold, just cool water with a piece of lemon. Um, and then I would make sure that I had a nutritious breakfast. So for me, it was either a sort of a tofu omelet, but with lots of veggies in it, so that I didn't go to my appointment and start that IV hungry. And that was important. On days that I needed blood tests before my chemo, I would just take that with me and eat it later. And then for lunch, you really should make your own food at home when you're in chemotherapy. And even though the cafeteria at the hospital was great, you really it's suggested that you don't eat anything there. So I'd take myself a really big nourishing salad, make sure that I had enough protein, a dressing with olive oil, um, and nothing that different or special, but I really made sure that these were absolute components of my day. I'd have healthy snacks, a piece of fruit, some blueberries, or a piece of extra dark chocolate. So I really incorporated brain foods in a very active way. And then for dinner, either something like a cauliflower steak, but I'd incorporate my spices because I have a deep connection to spices. I know from Ayurveda how healing they can be. I love the taste and flavor. So I'd have like a cauliflower steak with some veggies on the side, or make sure I had some lentils or legumes. Some of the recipes in my book, for example, the lentil or the dal with spinach is something I would eat a lot of because it was nourishing. It had folate, it had all of the fiber I needed. So it would be variations of those meals, but I think that keeping myself well nourished, hydrated, eating regularly, and keeping the meal simple and with spices that were very soothing to my mind and body were really key. In other words, I found the simpler I went, the better it was for me.
How often do you see this? Because it seems like there's such a correlation to Ayurveda. And have you found that within your work that a lot of the principles in Ayurveda are tested and are proven by science in your work?
I think the fields are sort of separate, right? So I'm not a practicing Ayurvedic practitioner, but I know some of the principles, and I definitely think there's this overlap. I think that what nutritional psychiatry has done is through the science behind the gut microbiome, we've been able to show that there's a real impact on what you eat and the impact on the gut microbes. And they are such a huge component of our system. So I can't say, well, Ayurveda speaks to many principles around spices, hot, foods being warm, and timing and things like that. I feel like what the gut microbiome has done and the science behind it is it complements these sciences. For example, Chinese medicine, for that matter, has also for eons been speaking about various principles that are holistic and integrated. I feel like all of this is now coming together, and that when I was still in training, an example of this is Herbert Benson brought forth the Mind Body Medicine Clinic at Mass General. And it used to be a very small center that talked about mindfulness and the connection of the body, mind, and spirit. And it has now grown to one of the most popular clinical services at Mass General. He passed recently, and it's been funded by the Red Sox Foundation and others. They've trained clinicians all over the world in mind body medicine practice. So I think everything has a trajectory and a time, and I feel that that's where we were at early on in nutritional
Mm.
psychiatry, bringing together other fields that have actually taught people different principles, but we kind of bringing it forward in an integrated way.
Mm. You mentioned earlier your patient who was on Prozac and blamed you
Mhm.
for the weight gain. I'm curious, I know it's very much case by case, but I'm curious your approach when you see patients, whether there is this combination of medication and nutrition, or if it's nutrition first and lifestyle first, and then we go to medication. I'm just kind of curious, like your high level approach to that.
So my the clinic that I founded is really almost like a tertiary care clinic. So it's based on referrals, and for that reason, individuals who come to me are looking for that nutritional psychiatry approach, a more
Yeah.
individualized, really precision based nutrition plan. Um, that that being said, I'm still capable and able to, and still do on occasion, prescribe medications. But I'm very much a food first person and use medications, which I have to say have saved the lives of many of my patients, use them when necessary. I balance it up with making sure we have an integrated approach for every single person that I see, that I'm asking them from what they drink to how they sleep to are they exercising, are they spending time outdoors, what are they doing, so that it's very much a holistic approach that's integrated with their other forms of help that they're taking. Therapy, I'm a huge believer in psychotherapies in the different forms. So I always want my patients to be engaged in some form of therapy. Not all of them are, but when they come to me, my role working with them is to consult with their team. It could be a psychiatrist, it could be a primary care doctor, infectious medicine disease specialist, whoever it is, but really put together a plan for them that will uplift their mental well-being.
So, what is the connection between mental health and food? Like, how would you say they're connected?
It goes back to that gut brain connection. The chapter one of This Is Your Brain on Food is where I speak about the gut brain romance.
Mhm.
And I called it that for a reason. The romance has good days and bad days, and so does the gut brain connection. Um, it starts really in the embryo because the gut and brain arise from the exact same cells in the human embryo. So from that fertilized egg, after the sperm meets the ovum and forms a zygote, the cells divide. Life's the embryo is developing into a body form. These two organs develop. They move far apart in the body, but they remain connected anatomically, biochemically, and physiologically by the vagus nerve, which is the 10th cranial nerve. And I like to call the vagus nerve a two-way text messaging system, allowing for these chemical messages to be transported back and forth between these two organs. But we've forgotten, because the gut and the brain are far apart in the body, that they are connected. The way that food interacts with this is that when we eat, the breakdown products of food on a day that we're eating a healthy salad or a healthier meal are more positive breakdown products like short chain fatty acids. These fend off inflammation. They help the environment of the gut microbiome. On a day that we are, or say we're a person who eats the standard American diet, called the SAD diet for a reason, or a lot of fast foods, the breakdown products are more toxic to that gut environment. And those toxic breakdown products start to break down the single cell layer of the gut mucosa, which is a lining of cells with very structured tight junctions, but it's a single cell lining thick. These damaging substances start to penetrate and break that, and over time, that leads to inflammation, dysbiosis, and something we call leaky gut. And that's what's problematic. So, if you are pursuing a diet that's less healthy, ultimately you're going to end up with dysbiosis.
What is dysbiosis?
Dysbiosis is an imbalance of the gut environment. So, when we think about it, there are trillions of microbes that live in the gut microbiome. And when we use the term microbiome, we refer to the encompassing genetic material. Now, those microbes, they're good guys and bad guys. So when we are feeding, when eating largely fast foods, for example, we're feeding the bad guys, and they thrive. And that imbalance between the good microbes and bad microbes leads to what we call dysbiosis. It's just an imbalance of that environment. The bad balance is toward inflammation in the gut. And because the gut and brain are connected, inflammation in the gut leads to inflammation in the brain. And that sort of forms that ecosystem where we start to understand. And I see in my clinical practice through dietary measures, when you start to eat more anti-inflammatory foods, when you start to lean into those healthier foods, when you tweak that diet away from those fast foods and coffee with a ton of, I have no issue drinking coffee if you like it and you can tolerate it, but it's what we add to our coffee that makes it less healthy for us. So all of those things lead to an imbalance in the gut microbiome.
And then that affects, so because the brain and the gut are connected, that imbalance in the gut microbiome affects the brain. Does it communicate through the vagus nerve?
So when that breakdown of the single
Yep.
cell layer happens, what the leaky gut is that penetration of those toxic substances into the circulatory system, for one. And then inflammation is basically what is going to be connecting these two organs now. And one organ is inflamed, and then the other organ becomes inflamed. So, the vagus nerve is also responsible for the text messaging around chemical messages, right? Because the other thing we forget is that serotonin, we often call the happiness hormone, but 90 to 95% of serotonin is made in the gut, and the receptors are in the gut. So if you've ever had a friend or family member take something like Prozac or another SSRI medication, a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, very often in the first couple of weeks they have gastrointestinal discomfort as a side effect, and that's because of the location of the receptors. So it's just helpful for us to understand that so much related to mental health is also located in the gut. Whereas we used to think about psychiatry and mental health as just a heads up approach, be like above the neck. It's actually so different now as we understand more.
And what is the way to repair like a leaky gut? Is it just good diet, or how does someone begin to do that if they're experiencing these
So
symptoms?
it's definitely a multi-pronged approach. Diet is one of them. And I say that because things like, an argument with your husband or a bad day at work, that level of stress has been shown can impact those gut microbes and affect them, and they change and evolve and start to form different breakdown substances. Therefore, it's not diet is a very large part of it, and we know from research that healing of that gut can take on an average about 28 days. So as you start to consume a healthier diet, you start to work on your stress. Personally, I really believe in a more integrated approach. So I will have someone who's not feeling great, even if they can't exercise yet because they're too depressed. I'll have them walk to buy the newspaper, walk to buy a cup of coffee, or take the dog out for a walk. So they're getting outdoor time, they're starting to move their body, starting to get out of bed, and really start to be a little bit more functional, because you have to meet the person where they're at. But that becomes part of the approach, as well as stress management, practicing mindfulness, sleeping well, making sure that you're sleeping well. All of these are key.
You mentioned, the example of the fight with the husband or something, a stressful occurrence. So what's happening chemically when that happens in the body?
So what the research has shown is that on a day that we are let's just call it a stressful day. We're having a stressful day. Things like cortisol in your body shoot up. This impacts the HPA axis. This impacts the microbes because the microbes, um, they almost, they function as part of our body. So, for example, they're involved in hormone production. They're involved in sleep and circadian rhythm, which is our internal body clock. They're involved in vitamin production. They're involved in mental health and neurotransmitters. They're involved in so many things. So when we are stressed in that way, they become involved in this interaction. And basically, it leads to more inflammation in the body. It leads to potential for dysbiosis, potential for leaky gut, and ultimately impacts our overall health, but definitely our mental health too.
Just quickly, what are microbes?
Microbes, it turns out that now that we know a little bit more, and the science is always
Yeah.
evolving around this. The microbes can be bacteria, fungi, protozoa, archaea, and a couple other types that live in that gut environment. And they mostly there to perform those functions. They're largely bacteria, and most of the studies that we do are actually on bacteria. Um, but that's the sort of overarching term for them is microbes.
Mm. And can we talk specifics about the types of food, beverages that you're seeing that are causing either leaky gut or
Mm.
just general inflammation?
Yeah.
Just so people are aware, because I feel like the coffee example is such a good one where we're putting certain things in our coffee. It's an
Hmm.
everyday thing.
Yeah.
We're kind of not thinking about it. We're thinking
Mhm.
it's empty calories. So,
Right.
can you give some examples?
So let's start there. And I'll use the coffee example as we can go back to coffee later on for other reasons, but we often are using added sugars and added and refined sugars in a way that we don't recognize. For example, going back to that patient, the processed creamer he was having at the Dunkin' Donuts store had a ton of sort of fillers, ingredients, not only processed ingredients, but stabilizers in that and added sugar. Um, but the added sugar is often in things that we don't realize, like savory foods, salad dressings, ketchup, store-bought pasta sauces. So that's a big category because one of the things we've uncovered, certainly in the US, is that there's sugar in so much of our food, especially in the form of high fructose corn syrup or other forms that we don't recognize. I like people to know one of the things I like to teach my clients is that 4 grams of sugar is 1 teaspoon because our food labels are in grams, but we cook. And if you follow any cookbooks or recipes, it's in pounds and ounces. So we don't know how to interpret our own food labels. But that can be powerful because you've heard me say blueberries are healthy. But if you have a blueberry yogurt, you can have up to 8 teaspoons of sugar. But you only know that if you can divide that number by 4 and understand how many teaspoons. So added and refined sugars is a huge one. Then there's these processed sort of seed oils and industrial oils, very frequently used in fast food restaurants because they're more economical, they can be reused, or they shouldn't be, but all of the stuff that happens. And so those are very pro-inflammatory. What they do is they increase our omega-6 fatty acids, and that tips the balance between omega-6 and omega-3 toward causing inflammation in the body. That's another big one. And then you have artificial sweeteners, and this can be a tough category because people are trying to come off sugar and they going to toward a low sort of sugar-free or low sugar alternative. But sometimes the artificial sweetener can actually be worse for the microbiome. So one has to be careful with that as well. And then you have the wrong types of fats. So those, fats, the hydrogenated oils, the unhealthy fats that you find in, say, shelf-stable baked goods, things like that. And you want to try to stay away from those. So basically, it's some categories of food that you won't be surprised to see processed, ultra processed junk foods on that list, but not for the reasons that you originally thought. Because often we think, oh, I consume too many of those cookies or whatever that is. It's my waistline that I should worry about. But actually, these are impacting us on a much deeper level. Not just weight, they're impacting our gut health, impacting our brain health, and they can be pretty disruptive to our system as a whole.
Mm.
Something we talk about is sunflower oil and
Yeah.
sunflower lectin, which is something that I'm seeing in almost everything.
Yeah.
Do you think that was like a evolution within the food industry where we're starting to get privy to vegetable oils, and now people aren't aware that sunflower lectin and sunflower oil is kind of the same effect, or what are your thoughts on that?
I think that one of the things in nutritional science, and as I do my work, my research, and clinical work in nutritional psychiatry, that I struggle with is dealing with food companies, food labels, and what savvy ingredient can they add.
Yes.
There's actually a repository of a list of more than 250 other names for sugar on food labels. And one of my favorite examples to quote is brown rice syrup, because people think about brown rice as a more as a maybe a healthy alternative with maybe a little bit more whole grain, but it's actually brown rice syrup is just sugar.
Cliff bars.
Yeah,
Cliff
right.
bars are literally brown rice syrup bars. They're
Right.
insane.
Correct. And so that understanding that the sugars are a problem, and then that the oils are a problem. So if you're going to come up with a new oil, or a one that is perceived to be healthier by the public, you might be inserting it in a way that not everyone has understood that. One example of this is if you've ever seen a bottle of vegetable oil. Well, vegetable oil may be largely soy, and that is a pro-inflammatory oil. So that's where I think, dealing with food companies, how things are labeled, they're not breaking the law. They're all within the law. But the issue is, as consumers, we have to be more savvy, because
Yes.
if you think about it, food companies want to sell food.
Mhm.
So their labels and their marketing is all going to be around that. Versus what I think we need to be educated about, which is, those gaps, understanding sugar, understanding the wrong types of oils, or not maybe wrong is a strong word, but the oils that are going to cause inflammation. So once in a while, if you have it, it's not going to kill you. But I would say that if that's consistently your diet, and that's what you're cooking with, or you thinking, I'm fine, I'm not gaining weight on fast foods, well, it's hurting you in other ways.
Mm. Yeah, the oil thing is so interesting, and I often think about maybe I don't think it's a conspiracy, but I think about like, so is it the economic choice of like it's a cheaper ingredient and that's why they're using it? Or is like the sunflower oil companies like, please use this and like,
Mhm.
well,
Like
kind of,
subsidized or
yeah,
something.
give it to you for
I
a
don't
special
know. I don't
price.
know the facts on that. What I do know around choices, say made in fast food restaurants, is they use the most economical oil.
Yeah.
Soy or
Um,
corn?
I don't know exactly, because they
Uh-huh.
vary.
Oh,
They
wow.
vary. They
Uh-huh.
Some of them use blends. It differs. What I can say is that it could be marketing. I'm not sure
Mhm.
specifically what the sunflower oil people have done, but it's definitely cheaper to use some of these processed vegetable oils. And many of us don't realize that they're pro-inflammatory.
Yeah,
So but then there's more to the story,
of
because if you
course.
think about fast foods, fast food French fries have added sugar in them, and more research has shown that you know hundreds of millions of dollars go toward research and development of these foods, especially studies of processed and highly processed foods. And things like adding flavor, right? It could be very subtle. You don't taste a French fry and taste sugar. It's very subtle, but it's there to boost that flavor. Unfortunately, what those ingredients do is they tap into a craving cycle in our brain and body, because sugar taps into the same circuits as dopamine and the reward system with dopamine. So, a street drug like cocaine will tap into the same dopamine pathways. That's one of the ways in which cravings get set up. So it's a lot of subtleties with things like fast food. It could be the oil. It could be that added sugar to French fries. And besides the overarching fact that it's highly processed.
Mm. Just one more question on the fast food piece, related to like the energy of food, because sometimes I mean, all the time, I feel the difference, whether I'm making my food or someone I
Hmm.
know who's putting a lot of love into the food.
Yeah.
And then I think about, just kind of like quickly processed
Mhm.
foods, whether it's at a
Mm.
fast food place or not, or even at a restaurant
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
It just has a different quality
Yeah.
energetically.
Yeah.
Have you, I know it's probably hard to do any research, but have you kind of thought about that or
Mhm.
experienced that yourself?
I have, and both. So a couple of things that I can share on this topic. There's a very large database study done at Harvard before, when I was probably much younger. So, but this very large database study looked at the fact that when you prepare your meals at home, you consume fewer calories, and you consume fewer calories even if you're not following any special diet. So, just there's something about eating out. Maybe it's the environment. Maybe it's the glass of wine. Whatever it is, you definitely consume more calories. That's one. But the other thing that speaks to this point is studies of the blue zones. For example, in Sardinia, it was one of the blue zones. They found that drinking 2 glasses of wine and eating the Mediterranean diet was very helpful for longevity. But when you look at the actual context of the situation, it wasn't just that great diet being largely Mediterranean. It was also the sense of community, eating with family, having a sense of joy around their food, looking forward to the meal at the end of the day, not standing at a desk eating alone, or as I did as a resident, frequently on the run between patients, between my pager going off or my cell phone. Um, Totally unhealthy eating habits. So context is also important. And I think that comes into what you're saying or asking that question. The context of food, how it's prepared, the kind of love and nourishment one gets from how, what might feel, to have something lovingly prepared versus, the bag at a fast food restaurant
Mm.
when you drive up.
Caffeine. I want to talk about caffeine,
Yeah.
especially as it relates to mental health.
Mm.
Um, I think this is just my perception and what I perceive. It's like so often I feel like I hear people talk about having anxiety. And as someone that's experienced that in my life too, I can relate. But I also perceive so many people drink so much caffeine
Yeah.
and look at their phones all the time. I'm like, what is causing what? Like, is it the actions of continually having a stimulant in your body and looking at your phone and never connecting to yourself in nature? Or is it like an actual brain chemical reaction? So
Mm.
I guess my question is, with something like anxiety, I think when you talked about depression and the use of SSRIs as something that originates in the gut, we have science around the serotonin levels. With anxiety, is there science around anxiety being something that is a chemical imbalance? And then two, what is the relationship between anxiety and what people are doing from a lifestyle perspective?
There's certainly evolving evidence around the serotonin hypothesis and anxiety. We know that many of the
What's the
medications.
serotonin hypothesis?
So with serotonin, the initial belief, certainly during my training, was that a chemical imbalance, is what leads to several conditions like depression and anxiety, just to name a couple of them. And recently, some research from the UK has really re-looked at the serotonin hypothesis. And I think the jury's still out on this. I feel that this is where I really feel strongly about the nuances in nutritional psychiatry, because this does not mean I'm going to tell someone who's on an SSRI medication to stop taking it. It could be life-saving for that person. So I think my point being that science is evolving and changing all of the time. But what we currently understand, we've been taught so far, is that there is this chemical imbalance. And anxiety is certainly one of those conditions that is helped by medications that either calm down the GABA system, so those are usually the anti anxiety medications, but also selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which calm down the body as a whole, but also tap into that serotonin. So if we think about it that way, I feel that what is happening with us, so we'll talk about coffee in a second, but what's happening with our phones is, I feel that, it's tapping into that very same reward pathway of sort of almost always being on, constantly checking and not being able to put the phone down. And it's it's interesting when you now on an iPhone, you get your screen report every
Mhm.
week, and always pay attention to that, because it's something I want to be checking in with myself about, because I have these times and days of the week when I'm just so busy, and I'm spending a lot of time on my mobile phone as a way of communicating with work and what I'm doing. But I know it's not the best for me, and I know it's not great for my brain. With coffee on its own is actually a substance that's rich in many, many polyphenols. So coffee itself is positive for the brain. It can be good for the heart. There've been books written about coffee and its positive effects. But in mental health, there's another nutritional psychiatry nuance, which is Coffee may or may not be good for you because of the caffeine being one of the substances. This is separate to what we add to it, because it may cause your heart to race. It may make you feel jittery. It may, a little bit may just not make you feel well. In which case, I talk about body intelligence. So it doesn't work for you, don't have it. Just don't come off any. If you're a coffee drinker, come off it slowly. But if you just had that half a cup and it made you feel jittery, it's totally fine to stop and just find something that works better for you. So it's body intelligence. Studies of anxiety have actually shown that sticking to less than 400 milligrams a day can be tolerated. But again, if you don't feel well and it increases your anxiety, then you shouldn't be drinking it. Another suggestion I have about drinking coffee is have it early in the day. If not, it impacts your sleep cycle. And the fourth is what we add to it. Plain coffee is usually fine, but if you're adding a creamer, think about what you're adding, what's in that creamer, and how you're sweetening. What are you doing to? I have this funny story from a few years ago when a very popular coffee store made this very colorful drink. And literally every patient walking into my office was carrying one of these, and I was like, "Okay, I know this is not healthy. How do I not be judgmental, but prove a point?" So
Yes.
eventually, I went to the store. I ordered it on my app because that also allowed me to check the nutritional information. And like the smallest size that didn't have any extra stuff on it, and the non-fat version had had 57 or 58 grams of sugar in the smallest size.
Wow.
And when I found that out, I was able to interpret that back to my patients instead of saying, "Oh, why are you drinking that?" You never want to make someone feel judged. It was more, how can I share this in a way that's educational? Like, would you, if you had that cup of coffee at home or that drink or however it was made, would you be adding that number of teaspoons? And of course, the answer was no. And that was, a way to think about, I'll have it less often, I'll have it once a month, whatever it was.
I see kids, and I live here in New York, and I feel like I see high schoolers walking around with venti, Starbucks, whatever it is, and like the cream and the whipped cream and all these things. And I'm mainly thinking about like the high levels of caffeine, and usually it's like
Yeah.
after school.
Mhm.
So it's like
Yeah.
later in the day, disturbing their sleep cycles. I can imagine they're on their phones underneath their covers up in bed at night, like I would do. And I'm just kind of like blown away,
Yeah.
like, and where that obsession comes
It's
from.
like the sugar caffeine combination too for someone young.
It
Yeah.
it could definitely be the
Perfect.
sugar that they're attracted to.
Yeah.
It could be how attractive it is. It could be the fashion. It could be the
Yeah.
socialization.
Yes.
What other
It's also
kids
like
are
seeing every
doing,
parent.
right?
Mhm.
It's and what are the parents doing? So I think it's a few different things. But to break it down for a second, interestingly, a study showed that coffee can help symptoms of ADHD in moderation in adults. I'm not saying
Moderation's
that.
how many milligrams?
So the study didn't necessarily give you a number of milligrams, but I would get some guidance around lower than 400 milligrams because that was a well done study in terms of sort of mental health symptoms. And so I think the study did something like 1 or 2 cups, but early in the day, and these were in adults. So I would say that, again, it comes down to how that makes you feel. I think with kids it gets more complicated. I think there's so much in the socialization process. It's I wish that they ate and drank healthier things, or they understood that what's fashionable may not be the best for their bodies or their brain,
Sure.
or that they realize, like that example, even the non-fat, no foam version that I ordered to test the app, could have a ton of ingredients that are not good for them. So.
Yeah. My dream is that by the time our kids are in
Mhm.
school, that, there is options at school that are, I don't know actually what's happening in schools right now, but what I remember from when I was in school, for example, we would have these like barely baked cookies, 10-minute
Oh, yeah.
break at 10 a.m. After my first 2 classes.
Mhm.
We would go downstairs, have a soft baked cookie, and I would go to my third period class and like wonder why
Go
I'm
to
falling
Spunk
asleep.
Fire. Mhm.
Yeah. And it's those types of things that, I'm like, where does it begin? And if the school is focused on having those healthier options to support their brains, their bodies, to support like optimized learning and interaction and mental health, I think that's a huge first step. And I'm just wondering like what needs to change? Is it budget? Is it awareness? I don't know.
I think it could actually be all of those things. One example is years ago when schools lost some funding in terms of school lunches. What happened was that when the government removed some of the funding, uh, big companies moved in and put in their vending machines. So kids had access to the sodas and the snacks. So it's so many factors that are competing. I feel that one of the ways at a grassroots level that we can intervene is as families, as parents, as communities. Simple things like children being aware of community gardens, or even if they live in an apartment, is there a way to grow herbs, or is there a school garden that they can participate in, so they understand from the ground up that eating healthy foods is a way of life. So part of it is how are we eating at home, and it doesn't. None of us is perfect, but if we are encouraging those healthy habits, another intervention is there's government, there's food companies, but I feel that that one of the things I do is I work with several nonprofit food related companies that are trying to educate the school system, change the understanding of what the kids are eating so that children actually learn to love broccoli. And how can we do that? And how can we create, little animated videos that are interesting to them, and they see, oh, this has so many great ingredients. That's also great for my brain. I think that becomes key because we know the developing brain is hugely important.
Yes.
So what you're saying is key to starting to change the system, but the intervention point is not clear. It could be at so many different levels. So always think about it as what can I, in my role, in my mission, do? And one of the ways that we're trying to affect change is through education, and really helping both families, communities, and parents educate their own, so that the kids don't want to eat the junk that you might be given at school,
Yes.
and can recognize it. And I think that the school systems also do need to maybe revamp that. But I feel that way about the hospital
I
as well,
know.
because
It's
go to the cardiac ward. Yeah.
wild.
When you go to the cardiac ward, and you watch what patients are given to eat. It's a complete
What is that? What do you think this is? Like that
that
relationship?
disconnect.
Yes.
It's such a disconnect between
It's
probably budget,
crazy. Yeah.
Yes.
how the hospital is run, where
Hospitals-
the dollar's going to,
Yes.
what should the patients be eating.
Where the money
And
is going is like,
where's-
because
right.
where's the money going?
Right.
Because there's money coming into hospitals.
Yeah.
Probably more than ever. Same with schools. Like there's a budget. There's not great budgets,
But there's a budget.
but there's a
There's- could
budget.
be-
And it mostly goes to things are already subsidized, which is the dairy industry, which is, corn and soy. So the government subsidizes them, which provides a cheap way to bring dairy and those types of products into schools. So yeah, it's just heartbreaking because it's almost like there's like a purposeful block between it, where it's almost like, do you perceive this? This is what I perceive, where it's like that's not science backed enough, maybe, especially in the hospitals. Do they perceive that this information doesn't have enough science backing it up yet to prove it, and they believe that medication and drugs is sort of the way?
I do think the medical system is flawed and suffering from the perspective of really not embracing the food as medicine movement. Lifestyle medicine doctors, functional medicine doctors, integrative practitioners, are individuals who are thinking out of the box about lifestyle and a checklist of, it's not just do you smoke or don't you smoke, it's what are you doing in your lifestyle, are you exercising, are you doing this, are you doing that. So I think that is one part of it, but we're also dealing with forces about how things are subsidized, how food companies run, where the food supply chain is coming from. Those are big issues related to government. So in the mission that I have, which is really to help improve the mental health of humanity, my feeling is the power is at the end of each of our forks. We have to make the decisions differently because in my lifetime, I don't think I can take on all of
Mhm.
the food companies and government to start to adjust where the dollars go. Because I do strongly believe if you follow the money, you'll probably figure this
Mhm.
out. But how can we do that? Or what's the method of doing that? it- can I help clinicians, which is one of the things I'm doing, learn to really use food as medicine and mental health prescription way, to include that in every visit as a discussion that they have, as a discussion point, without first pulling out their prescription pad. So they need to assess, is it appropriate? Because someone may be too sick or be too severely ill at a given point. They may need a prescription. But do you still include that discussion? Another way is, food advocacy. And how do we advocate for community gardens, teaching kids something different about food, working with companies that even create these fun videos for kids so that they're learning about food and they're saying to mom, I want broccoli, because it has all these really cool substances in them and they're going to help my body and brain or whatever it might be. I feel like to me, those are forming solutions that we have in front of us that we can do. And it may be a little bit more achievable. Are they hard? Yes, and they have challenges associated. But it's sort of a, whether it's a hospital, whether it's a school, whether it's government. It's a lot of this is driven by money. And the other thing I would say is that with hospitals, I think that the doctors are just not taught nutrition. One in five medical schools teaches nutrition, and I think maybe some schools are doing a little better than others. But we ourselves are not taught that. If you're interested, you have to learn it elsewhere. So some of that is all a part of this problem.
Mhm. Have you gotten any pushback from your peers or, the institutions in which you've worked in, just based on your work and how nascent it is, but
Mhm.
how powerful it is and it will be?
Thank you. Um, I've been in a very, very fortunate position thus far that, I have felt very supported by where I work, by my colleagues, in bringing forth new ideas that are definitely not being practiced by the everyday psychiatrist. And I feel very blessed for that. And part of my mission has really been not to speak without having some evidence behind it. In This Is Your Brain on Food, I reviewed probably well over 1,000 references to correlate that any fact quoted in the book is related to some scientific research. And I ended up including more than 550 references so that people understood this is no longer just a soft science, that the science behind the gut microbiome, that the science around research in whichever condition in mental health, there's something
Mm.
evolving. It's not, of course, 10 years from now, we'll be much further along. But I feel that people have been supportive. I feel that where the gap is that not enough practitioners are working this way. And to resolve that or to help that, I've created, and this program is in development, a training program at Mass General to help, and this will be a virtual, on a learning management system that's virtual so that we can actually reach practitioners all over the world to help them incorporate principles of nutrition and mental health into their practice. And they don't have to be just psychiatrists, they can actually be other practitioners. But the understanding that these are important principles to integrate into your health and your visit with that patient.
I think when we talk about mental health, it feels like people mostly talk about depression and anxiety, but there's so many more, there's schizophrenia, bipolar. Do you find that the data is different for different types of mental health disorders or mental health issues?
The data is different, the incidence is different, the correlation between all of these conditions could be different. The unifying factor and the thread through all of that is that they can actually all be impacted by how we eat. And a very fascinating study in schizophrenia looked at, this was an animal study, and this study looked at actually it involved animals and humans, transplanting the microbiome of individuals with schizophrenia and active symptoms into the microbiome of a mouse who had not been, so germ-free mice, they had not been exposed to
Is
microbes
that
or
through
germs.
feces?
That would have been a transplant. It would have been
Yeah.
a fecal transplant. So they did that and they transplanted part of the microbiome into the germ-free mice, and the mice developed symptoms of schizophrenia. So I think what's powerful to understand is that all conditions in mental health can be impacted by diet, some to lesser degrees than others. So I don't feel the first line of treatment is schizophrenia or bipolar disorders, which can be much more severe and life threatening. Maybe food, but can it be a part of the solution? Absolutely.
Mhm.
Mm.
And there's mounting evidence to show that. So even some recent work. So it I think if we consider food as part of that solution, it can be helpful for many of those conditions.
I've heard similar studies with autism as well, like
Mhm.
children with autism and altering their diet and experiencing an um, improved symptoms and
Mhm.
experiences. Yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Have you
very.
heard that as well?
I have. So I, it, autism can definitely be impacted by diet. It's not the only factor,
Sure.
but cleaning up the diet, improving it from any age, I think is super beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
So,
You mentioned before, so we develop when we were talking about the embryo turns into a zygote, right?
so the sperm and the
Sperm and the
the
embryo
ovum
come together
come together as the
for the
zygote. Yeah,
zygote.
the
So
fertilized
if you're
zygote.
being developed in your mother's body,
Yeah.
is like I guess the question is how much do your genes impact your mental health?
Genetics are definitely part of mental
Yeah.
health, and we would never want to ignore that. Genetics are part of it. Your mother's microbiome, what she's
Mhm.
eating, what is in her body, all of that is impacting the development of the embryo. So genes are definitely a part that we don't want to ignore. And in fact, like I said, when we say microbiome, including the genetic material amongst the microbes in the gut. So a very big part of it as well. I think that we don't have solutions through medications. For example, research has shown, we mentioned anxiety earlier, that, there's a very large component, often about 50% of individuals who, after taking medication, still don't have a resolution of symptoms and continue suffering.
What percentage? Sorry.
About 50%.
50%. Wow.
And so, firstly, it's not just about a medication, it is more of an integrated approach. And secondly, I think that we just need to consider food more part of the solution, even if it's not the only thing that we're doing.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to talk about alcohol and the
Yeah.
effects of alcohol on the brain and gut microbiome. Just different levels and different types of alcohol. So different levels of consumption, time of day, and then the type of alcohol.
Yeah. With alcohol, I like to compare it to coffee. And that's because some people don't go anywhere near coffee, as with alcohol. It's not for them. But others do. And very often, one of the pointers with alcohol is what you add to it. So having a cleaner cocktail is always going to be better for your health. So not adding the extra, simple syrup is simply sugar. So not adding all the mixes and other liqueurs. Having a cleaner cocktail is always going to be a little bit healthier than in moderation. And if it's a problem, seeking help or getting help with it, because especially with COVID, a lot of clients that I was evaluating, even on telehealth, were struggling quite a bit because of boredom, isolation, stress. Being in a large family situation
Sure.
and quarantine. So that was a big factor. Time of day, if one should never be relying on a glass of wine to help you sleep because it disrupts your sleep architecture. So if you're having a glass of wine with dinner and it's not related to your sleep and you're not depending on that to help you sleep, that's different from really leaning on it. With food early in the evening, not making sure that it's part of your sleep system, and what you add to it, and then moderation. That's the key with all of these things, even with coffee. Having, if you do consume alcohol, clean cocktails and in moderation. If you do consume coffee, also what you add to it in moderation. That tends to be a really good guideline that people can use. And if alcohol is not for you, some people have a little bit and they become jittery and uncomfortable, and the effects can be very long lasting. It's related to the nervous system, and we can't ignore that. But a lot of my philosophy in nutritional psychiatry, whether it's a type of food or a food group or alcohol or caffeine, is I find that more people do not consume these. So I have to find solutions that are guidance around how can you incorporate it in a slightly healthier way,
Sure.
moderation, and how can you not avoid or give up something that you might enjoy, but do it in a more responsible way.
How does wine affect your sleep architecture, and how does alcohol affect your nervous system?
So, with alcohol, it taps into the same receptors in the brain as do, say, anxiolytic medications. And by disrupting that neurotransmitter system, you, for example, if you've say had gone to a party and you've had too many glasses of wine or something, you may wake up the next morning not only slightly dehydrated but slightly jittery, and that's all the impact on your nervous system. When you're leaning on, say, a glass of red wine to bring on um, that phase where you're feeling more sleepy, it disrupts the different phases of sleep that you go through. And your sleep cycle is meant, together with your circadian rhythms, to help you rest. Rest is a huge part of how cells heal themselves, and you wake up in the morning. You're supposed to feel refreshed. And what the alcohol does is it disrupts which cycle comes first and the order of your sleep cycle. So that's a nicer way of just saying it disrupts sleep architecture.
Wow.
And so you wake up, not well rested, and you've not had the REM sleep at the right time, and it.
I always thought it was
can
the
be-
sugar. Is it the alcohol?
It's actually, it could definitely be the sugar
Yeah.
content, but the alcohol itself works on the nervous system. So,
Wow. Because
yeah.
I always thought it was like the sugar would kind of wake, if I don't drink anymore, but
Yeah.
when I would, it would be, I'd wake up at like 11 or 12 if
Mhm.
I'd gone to bed at like 9 or 10. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, what is this? And you
Yeah.
just feel out of it.
Yeah,
I was
and you
like,
think the sugar is waking you up.
I thought it was the sugar. I'm like, oh, I think
Mm.
it's the sugar. But yeah, it probably is the combination.
Yeah, it's
Um,
definitely the combination. And like some, not all wines are they definitely made from grapes, so there's sugar.
Mhm.
But I think the actual impact on sleep architecture more comes from the nervous system
Wow.
impact. But
What
of
are
course, the
like
sugar's not great.
if our listeners are to go grocery shopping, like what
Mhm.
are your favorite things for people to have for their mental health that they can buy for eating?
So, while none of these foods may be a huge surprise, I think there's some that we can tap into that we
Mhm.
haven't done before. I like to think about it in terms of some of the antioxidant groups, like sulforaphane rich veggies, like your cauliflower, your Brussels sprouts, your cabbage, your asparagus, broccoli, all of those. And actually, the broccoli sprouts are super nutritious. So, if you can get those at a farmer's market and add them in, they actually are even more nutrient dense than the broccoli itself. Though that's a nice group because they're low calorie, they're rich in the antioxidants that our brain needs, and they're very filling, they're very satiating. So, I love the produce section because there's a lot of stuff that you can get that is inexpensive. And if you're willing to do a little bit of prep, like make the salad and things like that, they're going to last longer and fill you with fiber because I think it's like two in every 10 Americans eats enough fiber in their diet. And what you get fiber from your vegetables, your fruit, lentils, beans, nuts, seeds, healthy whole grains. So that's a must for me. Is spend some time in the produce section. If you don't have time to prep that cauliflower, get it frozen. Just watch that there's no added sauce, salt, or syrup in it. And frozen can be just as great because in the United States, veggies are flash frozen as well as fruit. So it's a good alternative to someone who's busy or doesn't want to do all of that prep work. I also like people to think about if they can and if they have access, grass-fed beef, wild salmon if they can, and if that's out of their budget, then canned salmon is an option. This is a good option. It still gives you those omega 3s and those healthy fats that you need. Um, I like people to not ignore the centiles because there's beans, legumes, lentils, and those canned foods that actually are good options for them. So for me another staple that they need to spend a little bit of time incorporating legumes and lentils into dishes, which are satiating, budget friendly, but also really good for their body. And I like them to pay attention to colors, and this is where it takes me to the spice aisle. Spices are like the hidden like chemistry in our kitchen because they have so many brain-rich nutrients, and they add flavor without the calories. So I usually suggest to people don't get the blends and the mixes because those can sometimes have fillers and other things, and then including salt. But if you just get the pure spice, you can flavor up something and really make it super tasty and cook the same foods in different flavors and still get the brain benefits. So those are
What are
those are
your
some
favorite
of the things.
spices and what are their
Um,
benefits?
yeah, so I love turmeric with a pinch of black pepper. The black pepper activates the curcumin in turmeric,
Which is
and
anti-inflammatory, right?
it's anti-inflammatory. It's an antioxidant. It supports brain cells. It's just a great addition if you can tolerate it and if it's something you like. If you don't cook with it, add it to soup, a smoothie, or even a tea. I like spicy food, so I like capsaicin or chili peppers of different kinds. I love mint. Mint, actually, I love making a mint tea in the afternoon. It really keeps me a little bit more alert than I'd rather skip an extra cup of coffee, in fact, and have a mint tea. I love rosemary with veggies,
Mm.
and rosemary actually has been shown to help cognition. So it's a great addition to those things. And then I like some of the more Asian inspired spices like the cumin and the coriander because I'm used to cooking with them. And that's how my mom and my grandma cooked. And they great to add flavor to things like black beans. They just make them more flavorful and interesting to eat. So.
Mhm.
My last question, do you recommend people get like a food sensitivity test too? Because I wasn't sure how the correlation between food sensitivity
Mm.
and mental health as
Yeah.
well.
I find that if someone is struggling with not being able to tolerate food sensitivities, getting a food sensitive test from their allergist or their primary care doctor is probably a good idea before they say engage in discussing how are we going to tweak their foods for their better mental health. The reason is, and I feel like I'm seeing so many more patients than ever now in my practice that have food sensitivities or let's say late onset almost allergy in quotation marks because it's not clear if it's a pure allergy or they just can no longer tolerate it. And I do think it's related to gut health. I really think
Yeah.
it goes back to gut health. So getting it tested and maybe a short elimination of a certain food to see how they feel, both physically and mentally, becomes key. And I think the combination of testing or elimination and paying attention to healing their gut becomes really powerful in helping them.
And then supplements. What do you think about supplements, supplementing? Are there any ones that you think are good for most people?
So, I feel like none of us eats a perfect diet. And so supplements become important to fill those specific gaps. In the Northeast, many people may be deficient in vitamin
Mhm.
D. You can get 80% of your daily requirement by spending time outdoors, but you might also need a supplement. But I also believe in test, don't guess. So check your level with your doctor. And there's a place for supplements. The ones that I find are helpful for people are depending on what their diet is. I find that individuals who are plant based might need vitamin B12. Not all of them, but some of them. So I think finding that balance of foods that maybe you don't eat in your diet, if that's there's a reason you don't eat it, but how do we supplement that if you may not be getting the nutrient that you need?
Mhm.
Love it.
This is
Amazing.
so good.
This was so good. I'm so grateful you came and
My
I have your
pleasure.
book. It's amazing. It's so
Mm.
easy to read
Mhm.
and it's
Thank you.
just super powerful. And, as someone that's had mental health in my family and even dementia and Alzheimer's, I think this work is so important
Thank you.
and I'm so grateful for it. So thank you so much for coming on Almost 30.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was lovely to meet you guys in
Lovely to meet you
person.
in person. Thank
You
you.
too.
Bye,
So
everyone.
fun. It's really hard to find the perfect gift. And I've just taken kind of a informal survey of family and friends and just noticed that skincare and body care is like a surefire awesome gift for anybody. And if it's clean, I mean, see you later. So that's why this holiday season, I am giving the gift of Osea to some of my nearest and dearest friends and family. Osea is a California based skincare and body care brand that has been making clean, vegan, and cruelty free skincare products for over 25 years. They use seaweed as their hero ingredient because it's super nutrient rich. It has endless benefits, including anti aging and moisturizing. I absolutely love their products. I freak out when I start to run out. Probably my favorite is the Andaria algae body oil. Oh my God. You've probably seen this go TikTok famous. It is best selling. It is leaving your skin so supple, so glowy, so hydrated, so healthy. I am so excited for you. Their products are clinically proven, truly an unmatched body care experience, both skincare and body care products. And this winter season, you want to make sure that your skin is staying healthy. I know it's hard out there in the winter. So for a gift that will impress, check out Osea's bestseller Minis collection. Right now, our listeners get 10% off your first order with promo code almost 30 at oseamalibu.com. You'll even get free samples. They're so good about that with every single order. And orders over $50 get free shipping. That's 10% off at oseamalibu.com. Promo code is almost 30 at checkout. Enjoy. I swear 9 out of 10 couples I talk to these days say that they met on a dating app. And I was actually talking to a couple that we are friends with that met on Match. And I was like, oh my gosh, OG dating app. I love it. I love it. I love it. And they're doing it right. And what they believe is that the most important relationship that you have is with yourself, which I will attest is the foundation to a strong relationship, whether romantic or friendship, any relationship. And honestly, in a world where you can choose to do anything or anyone, choose you first. And that is how we create real, lasting, authentic relationships. And Match did a really cool study over 5,000 US singles. And it said that there's a new triple threat on the dating horizon. They agreed therapy, self care, and emotional maturity. Come on, we're so important in a partner. So, someone who's interested in therapy goes to therapy, has a self care routine, makes self care a priority, and emotional maturity. In fact, 87% of singles say it's very important for their partner to prioritize their mental health, and 81% report they engage in self care at least monthly. Wild, 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 wild. So, anyone out there who is feeling like, where are they? Where are they? I highly recommend checking out Match. Hop on the Match app, and I have a feeling that you might match with someone who prioritizes themselves in a very healthy way, making sure that their mental, emotional health is really solid before entering into a relationship. Granted, doesn't have to be perfect. We all know that, but we got to make sure that that is a priority. If you do you already know that the best relationships show up when you show up for yourself first. There's never been a better time to try Match. Download the Match app today. Okay, so I took my new Lululemon gear out for a little ride yesterday. I went for a run. I haven't been out for a run in quite some time. It's getting a little chilly, but it's like the perfect weather to have a nice, brisk run. And I was so happy to have my Down for It All vest from Lululemon. The fabric is super lightweight, but it's also windproof and water resistant. It's super stretchy and breathable, but kept me incredibly warm, like the core of my body warm. I love it. I got it in black, but y'all, Lululemon knows how to do it with their colors and patterns. So just know that anything you're getting this holiday season from Lululemon, you have the option to just like pow with the color and patterns. I also ran with my base pace high rise tight. Okay, so this tight is great for just like really holding you all in while you run. It's also very cozy. So it's made of Nulux. It's this sweat wicking, quick drying fabric that's brushed also for warmth. It has a back pocket, which I kept my phone in. I just like kept my keys in there as I ran. And it's great because there's no inseam for a stride that's like super, super smooth. So like I felt like I could run honestly forever. I think Lululemon is one of the best gifts you can give your loved ones, especially if they're a Lulu fan. I am. They're just the best. So when you are buying your gifts for people you love this season, just remember that when you are buying them clothes and accessories for moving their body, you are also just gifting them joy because moving your body, staying active, getting outside is really such a gift. So set joy in motion this holiday season with Lululemon's best gifts. They are truly the best. Go to lululemon.com. Lululemon.com, LULULEMON.com. Enjoy.
Thank you so much, Dr. Uma. I really appreciate you coming on. Again, the book is This Is Your Brain on Food.
Thank you, thank you, thank you to our sponsors for this episode. As always, just bringing you brands that we really love and use ourselves. For discount information on any of our sponsors, you can go to almost30.com or check out the show notes. Thanks, y'all.
We love you guys. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.